Okay guys, so today I'm going to be brewing my first Heady Topper clone. About 2 weeks ago, me and my buddy got 2 cans of the actual Heady Topper. It was a little old, it was 3 months old. I think it was canned on, I believe it was October 21st, and we drank it, it was probably January 12th. It was still pretty good. Definitely not as potent as it is when it's fresh. I have had it fresh. But basically, I made sure I harvested both cans of yeast. I did a starter, and I stepped it up. So what I did first was I got the 2 cans of yeast and put that into a 1.020 200 milliliter starter. Let it sit in there for about 2 days. And there was some activity. You could see some bubbles, and definitely there was some yeast propagation. Then I poured on top of that a 1.040 400 milliliter starter for the second step, and I did not decant the first step, and just to kind of get everything moving again. Then I put it in the fridge, let the yeast kind of settle out, decant it, and then I made a 1800 milliliter starter at 1.040, which is my normal starter. I made it a little bigger because I am going to try to do some yeast banking for the first time with this Conan yeast, because it is such a hard yeast to get. So here is the starter now. As you can see, plenty of yeast. So it's still cold crashing out. I will take probably about 2 vials for yeast banking out of that. And then the rest will go into the beer. So let me show you the recipe. So here's the recipe I have. I'm not taking credit for this. I got this recipe off of the Homebrew Talk forums, and then looked around a little bit more for some water additions to get as close to as I could to the real Heady Topper. One thing I found pretty nuts is out there that there is some research saying that the Alchemist uses 750 parts per million hardness. That's insane. So I did not want to go that high. So as you can see, I have 19.8 grams of gypsum going into the lauter tun, and I have 13.8 grams of gypsum going into the mash tun. This gives me roughly, I'll pull up my brew and water. As you can see here, there you go. So I'm not sparging with 9 gallons. What I do is I use the same water that's in my hot liquor tank, and then just do the right amount of water and then leave the rest behind. So I treat the whole amount, so that's why it says 9 gallons, but I do not sparge with 9 gallons. So as you can see, my water is right here as soon as it focuses. There you go. So my water is the second line yellow. I have pretty soft water. I wouldn't say it's hard or soft. It's kind of in the middle. I have a lot of chloride, and there's probably more because this water test was done in June. So it's as you can see outside and later in the video, there's plenty of snow on the ground. We just got hit with 24 inches of snow in Philadelphia. So definitely chloride's probably up a little bit from the salt. So as you can see, my final numbers come out right here. So on the calcium, I'm at 155. My sulfate is 339, and my chloride's staying right there. This brings me up to a hardness of 425. That is where I want to be. I don't really want to go too much higher. I am worried that this beer will come out a little too bitter if I go as high as the Alchemist does. So I'll let them do that, and this is what I'm going to do. So we'll see how this comes out. So back to the recipe. So as you can see, recipe calls for Thomas Fawcett Pearl Malt. That is the main backbone of this beer. You can always sub it out for some 2-row or Maris Otter, but I tried to keep it as authentic as possible, and this is what they have online. Caramel, we actually did not have any caramel at my local homebrew shop, so I used Carapils, so I'll have to update that. White wheat malt, and then some turbinado sugar, which is just basically raw sugar. There is a hop shot. It is not 3.53 ounces. I was trying to get the IBUs correct on here, so it is a 10 milliliter hop shot, which gives you roughly 115 IBUs, I believe, for a 90-minute boil at the gravity I'm shooting for. So that is not correct. It's just there, so that way the IBUs are up to date. And then, as you can see, we have a little bit of aroma hops going in, and then we have the knockout hops going in. And what I'm going to do is, you can see here on the steep steps, I don't know why that Columbus is not up here. It should be up higher, but anyway. There's a lot going into a Whirlpool in this one. So what I've read online is some people like to split up the Whirlpool pool edition. They'll split it in half. They'll put some in while the wood's naturally cooling down to about 180 degrees. And then they will hold it for about a half hour below 180, in the 160 to 180 range, and you'll see that later in the video. That's what I'm going to try to do today. I've read a couple reviews saying that when you put them all in at once, it does not give you the authenticity. So then obviously the big boy is the Conan yeast, which you have to harvest from Heady because it does not exist commercially, so you cannot buy it. And then there's a big dry hop edition. Basically what the Alchemist does is they do a 4-day dry hop at a time. So what they'll do is they'll dry hop on day 14, I believe, and then again on day 18. It's either that or it's day 18 and day 22. But I believe from what I read, Heady is 28 days grain to glass. I could be wrong on that, but I know it is short grain to glass. So that's the recipe. And here's the numbers I'm shooting for. Still working out the kinks with my system, so my efficiency is not the greatest. So this is what I'm shooting for. About a 1.077, 1.075 in that area. The IBUs obviously you can't really taste that much, so that's just the theoretical IBU count. Color's a little high. It should be in the 6s. I believe it should be around 6.2 or 6.5, somewhere in that area. So it's a little high, and obviously the alcohol is right around what Heady is. So that's the recipe, and we'll keep you guys up to date as I go. So now, taking all my grains, putting them in my serial killer grain crusher. Have it attached to an 18-volt drill. Get it going. Alright, let's take a look at the crush. As you can see, exposed a lot of the sugars and still have the husks intact. And what I have my grinder set to is about the thickness of a quarter. As you can see, quarter fits right in. If I wanted to roll the rollers, it would slide right through. So that's about the thickness I use, and I get a nice crush like that. You can see husks are still intact, and everything else is exposed and ready to go into the mash. So while I have my mash heating up to temperature, this recipe, since it is, I'm trying to make it as authentic as I can to the real Heady topper, it calls for a lot of gypsum. I'm putting 13.8 grams into the mash. I like to do that while the water is cold. Gypsum is very, it kind of dissolves better in colder water rather than hot water. And then I have over here my hot liquor tank warming up. I have that. I have some gypsum in there as well to keep the sparge water. So we are coming in right about 158. That's what Beersmith tells me I should begin to mash in at. So now we will mash in all of our grains. I'm going to put the camera down for a minute for this one. All right. So just mashing in now. So what we're shooting for with this mash is we want the beer right around 150. So going in at 158, accounting for the grain temperature. Should get this out now. A little bit of a dough ball because I wasn't staring when I poured. Okay. So that's my first experience with dough balls before. Never had one of those. But hey, we'll make it work. We'll fix it. So again, we're shooting for about 150 mash temperature for this. I do run a recirculating mash, so what I'll do with this one is I will let it sit for about half hour. I have some insulation I'm going to put on the mash tun today to see if helps hold the temperatures a little better. I have not done that in the past, but as you can tell, got lots of snow. It is actually pretty warm today. It's about 60 degrees today, so it's actually kind of pleasant out. But I still want to insulate it just to kind of keep an even mash. So what I'll do is I'll do a half hour of a sitting mash, and then I will begin to recirculate through the liquor tank. Alright, so check back in. So what I'm doing here is I basically ran to Home Depot today and grabbed water heater insulation. So what I did is I just cut it just big enough so that I'd have a little gap here so all my outlets and probes could stick out. But basically just enough so that way we have a little more extra insulation. Got a Velcro band around it just so I can remove it easily, so when I want to direct heat I can do that. So as you can see, we're coming in right at about 151, 152. So that'll lower a little bit. I can always take the lid off if I want it to go down some. But we'll see how long that stays there. And once we get to about that half hour mark, I'm going to start to run the recirculation. So as you can see, we have the tower power and everything. If you want to see actually how my system works, there's some detailed videos on how I brew on my Herm system. So you can check that out in my profile. But basically, I'll run the recirculation for about a half hour, 45 minutes, do an iodine test, make sure all the sugars have been converted, and then I will start my sparge. About a 45-minute sparge with that. Alright, check back in. Alright, so we started to lose a little bit of temperature, coming in just below 150. That's alright though. This is supposed to be a pretty highly fermentable beer. The final gravity I'm looking to hit is about 1.012. Anywhere from 10 to 15 really is good. So just started the recirculation. See if we can get the temperature back up. I will put the sparge arm on. I just run that a little bit to kind of get the grains out of the lines. And then, so that's basically what we'll do. Mash has about another half hour. I'll check the sugars and then we will begin to switch over to the boil kettle. Alright, check back in. Alright, so just performed the iodine test and it looks like all the sugar has been converted. We're still holding right in about 150. So now I'll take the next 10-15 minutes. I'm going to heat up the water tun a little higher. Try to get this mash up to about 168. And then I will start to sparge. Alright, so we are now sparging. I've already sparged for about 15 minutes just to get the water level right, as you can see. Keeping the water about 2 inches, an inch to 2 inches above the grain bed. Get a nice slow fly sparge. As you can see, that is some clear wort. Very, very clear. No grain, no cloudiness, just straight up clear wort. One of the advantages to fly sparging, or I'm sorry, recirculation. Fly sparging as well, but mainly the recirculation. Alright, so we got about another half hour in the fly sparge, so when that's done we will get the boil up and then we'll do the hop shot. Alright, so the hop break just ended. Now it's time to end our 10 milliliter hop shot. Try to suck some wort up so I can get all the hop out. Hard to do do with one hand. Sorry, guys. Alright, so it looks like I got most of it. So now we will boil for 90 minutes. And that hop shot should give us roughly about 110, 115 IBUs. So very bitter, but that is the only bittering charge this beer gets. Everything from here on out is at the end of the boil, and it's all aroma hops. Alright, so we'll check back in then. Alright, so now the fun part. We got to put in all our additions of hops. So this is going to be our 5-minute addition. This is going to be our flame out. And then I broke up the 2 steeping Whirlpool hop additions into 2 separate ones. Broke it right down the middle with each one. This one's going to go in when it gets to about 200. This one's going to go in when it gets to 180. So let's get this in. So as you can see, I got my chiller in, get that nice and sanitized. I won't run any water through that until the end of the Whirlpool, so that's just sitting there just to get sanitized. Got my pump running too, just so we can get some boiling, work through it, clean out, get it all nice and sanitized. And then we got all of our big hop additions. Alright, so now we will knock out the flame. Pour in our knockout hops. Okay, so our knockout hops are in, which is our biggest hop addition of the I also have the Whirlpool running because I have my temperature probes on the line of the Whirlpool, so that'll help me know when the wort gets under 200. So once we get to 200, I'm going to throw in our first half of the Whirlpool hops. So I have the tower power running just to get a temperature right there, and I also have a gauge right there. So we have 2 different ways to measure the temperature. Once I see that drop to 200, we will throw in those half of those Whirlpool hops, and then what I'll do is when it gets down to 180, I'm going to throw in the rest of them, and I won't turn on the wort chiller for a half hour. At that point, I mean, it's probably about 45 to 50 degrees outside right now, so it'll probably cool down majority of the way by itself. But what I'll do is let it sit, and then whatever else needs to be cooled at that point, I'll do with the wort chiller. Alright, we'll check in for the next edition. Alright, so we're coming in right in on 200 degrees, so I'm going to put in the first half of the Whirlpool hops into the Whirlpool. I'm going to try to keep this between 180 and 200 for, it'll probably take about 10 minutes. I just looked at the thermometer for out here. It's about 52 degrees right now, and it's going to obviously drop because the sun just went down, so we're going to hope to keep this at there for about 10 minutes, and then at the 180 mark, I'm going to throw in the second half of the Whirlpool hops. Okay, so we're coming right in on 180 degrees. It's been about 10 minutes since I put the first Whirlpool edition in. So I will put the last of the hops in now. And that is the last of the hop additions. Now I will let this go for a half hour. And what I will do is I will try to keep it between 180 and 160 degrees. By doing that, once I get to about 170, I'm going to kick on the flame on a very low burn. That way we can keep some heat under it. So we'll try to keep it right around 170. As long as it doesn't go above 180 or below 160, we should be okay. Keep some of the essential oils in the hops that have a lower flash point. So we'll see how this goes. And then we will cool it with the wort chiller down to below 70 and get it into the fermenter and into the freezer. All right, we'll check in a half hour. All right, so we're just coming up on the half hour mark. I just turned on the wort chiller, and you can see it already dropped about 10 degrees. Through the half hour, it actually stayed right about 170 with the burner on. As you can see, wort's a lot darker now. A little bit of a green tint, obviously from all the hops we put in. So now I'll run this out until this reaches below 80 degrees, pitch it into the fermenter, and then get the yeast in it and get it in the freezer, and then we'll see what happens. See if we get a Heady topper clone. Alright.